So the first thing we're going to do is gray box out our environment. And so we want to look at just laying out very basic shapes for each element. So we're going to start off by modeling a kid's room, but we're going to use different reference images from the internet, and we're going to change them slightly so they fit our needs. So let's go ahead and fire up Maya. So what we want to look for is repetitive elements within our scene that we can only model once and reuse. And this even goes within our gray box. So you can see here that this curved surface here can be duplicated across most of the elements or the items within the scene. And the reason why manufacturers do that is to save money. So they'll have a mold or some sort of repetitive process, and they can just they can pour the plastic in and reuse it. So let's go ahead and start off with the very base of our scene. So I'm going to create a cube. And one area that I like to focus on whenever I'm modeling is I begin by adjusting my camera. So I'm going to go to View, select Camera, and right off the bat, my focal length is set to 35. This still sort of gives us the effect of a fisheye lens. To get closer to a nice between like an orthographic and just a very standard view, I usually stop at about focal length 70. And that gives me a nice static, almost standard view, like we're almost looking at the front view or the right view, but we're doing it in perspective. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click and select all the faces, and then I'm going to shift right-click. I'm like holding shift and holding on the right mouse button. I'm going to just reverse my normals. Now, if your box ends up black like this, you want to go to View and turn on backface, or shading rather, turn on backface culling so we can look inside of our scene. I'm going to shape this out just a little bit so it gives me a little bit more of like the room shape that I sort of see here. And again, like I said, I'm going to model this almost verbatim, and then I'm going to change it around later, giving me the base to work from. So let's go ahead and bring this down. And I'm going to go to Object Mode, and I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to name this Room. I'm going to save this off. Now, I can turn on the visibility of this here, but right now I just want to leave it in a reference mode so that I can't select it and I can just start adding items. Ordinarily, because we're going to be bringing this into a game engine in this class, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're just going to sort of gray box or model out the scene, but in a separate environment we're going to actually model each one of these out in a separate Maya file. So let's go ahead and right-click, and I'm just going to start laying out cubes. Now what I want to do is I actually want to create these interactively. So I'm going to hold shift and right-click, and I'm going to go down to interactive creation. And then I'm going to hold shift and right-click again and go to polycube. This sort of increases or speeds up my workflow. And I'm just going to start off by laying out some simple cubes, starting from the walls out. So something like this. I'm going to scale this out a little bit. Now it's okay if your proportions are off, because we can always adjust this. I'm going to hit Control D, right-click out here and go to Vertex. And I'm going to just play with the scale. Go ahead and hit focus on this. All right. I'm going to duplicate this as well. Bring it over here. I just hit Control D on that, shaping this other wall. Now the wall here is a little bit longer, so I'm going to right-click, go to Face, select this face and pull it out. And I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm actually going to shift it back a little bit, and then scale it down. Duplicate it again. I'm going to hold spacebar down, go up to Modify and Center Pivot. It looks like I missed it. There we go. Bring this down. Now, even in my gray box, I want to make sure that even though it's supposed to be sort of like these cubes that represent it, I do want my scene to have some sort of shape. So small things like having beveled edges, right? So let's go ahead and hide everything but this object. Let's turn on wireframe, and then let's go ahead and hide everything but this object. I'm going to go to edge mode and click this edge, hold shift and double click so it goes around to all of those edges. Then I'm going to shift right click again and go to bevel edge, and that opens up my properties here. Because in my scene, it's sort of like it's going to be passed by or whatever, so I just sort of need a slight, so I might go to 2 segments here, something like that, just to give myself, increase the fraction a little bit just to sort of emphasize that. Then I'm going to go to object mode. Now I'm going to go to vertex mode, and I want to show you something. That you can never have n-gons, which means faces with more than 4 sides. And you can see just in this edge here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 edges there. So the fix to that is I go to vertex mode. Let's go to our front view here, or actually our side view. And then I just highlight all of these edges here. And you can see it's the same on the other side. And I'm going to hold shift and right click again and go to connect components. And you can see that now we have a 1, 2, 3, 4 edges here. And I'm just going to hit G and redo that again. Okay. Now with that on, or that selected, I can sort of play with the size. So I'm going to go to vertex here, bring it up. And again, I didn't measure anything. I didn't go with any of this stuff. And I really, whenever I have like new artists, I ask them to sort of eyeball it because it does train your eye to sort of see the shapes better. We want it just sitting against that, like that. Another thing I like to do to help me see it is I turn on shaded mode so I can actually see where the ambient occlusion is. All right, let's go ahead and duplicate that, bring it back. You can see from the angle that we're at, you can actually see it down there. All right, I'm going to lay out just the box for that. I'm going to hit Control D. Go to my Modify, Center Pivot. Go to my face mode, bring that in. And then just bring it up, just above the bed like that. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this cube here. Go to vertex mode. Go to object mode. Hit my center pivot here. Scale that down a little bit. And rotate it. And then if I hold W and left click, you can see I get all of this. If I go to object, you can see that it sets my axis to whatever the object's facing. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this wall and then just shift this back a little bit. Now all of this, like even this wall here, if you notice, like it needs a little bit more room, so I can actually pull this face out a little bit. Let's bring it back to reference mode. Let's move this back. And then let's go ahead and bring this back a little bit. Now all of these additional set pieces, like these faces on the back here, because they're not going to be seen, we want to make sure we delete them. Alright, so let's scale this out. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. Duplicate it again, and then one more time down here. Just select that face. Let's move these up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video now because we're at 9 minutes. And I'm just going to show you, I'm going to bevel these edges out, bevel out these guys too, just so you can see like what I expect from what the gray box should be before we go into the modeling phase. So a gray box essentially should be at this level of detail. Notice that I don't have the buttons or anything like that, but the chair should also be modeled, the monitor, and then this railing. I want to talk a little bit about efficiency. So I'm going to go ahead and separate. I'm holding Shift and right-clicking here to separate these pieces. I'm going to highlight all of them, and we're going to look at them. Now, when you're looking at efficiency of modeling, one of the things you want to make sure is any faces that are not going to be seen get deleted. So I'm going to go to face mode, highlight the whole thing, and then what I do is I only select the faces that I can't see, or deselect the faces that I do see. So for example, back here, hold on, let's hold Control and Shift here, and then let's deselect by holding Control everything but those. So if I go to shaded mode, you'll see if I hit delete, no one's going to see those faces. Now, I sometimes like to leave the bottom faces just because if I know in the future, like, this object is going to have some sort of physics on it, it might, you know, kind of fall apart. You know, like I could knock it over, or like, you know, like in the game. Another thing I want to point out is a quick way on how I make these wheels, low poly wheels. So what I do is I'm going to go ahead and just Shift right click and then make a cube, or I'm sorry, right click. So the way this works is if you don't have anything selected, you can Shift right click, go to polycube, and then you can drag out a cube. Okay? And what I'm going to do is Shift right click and then just smooth that out. And go to edge mode and delete this center edge. I'm going to hit W here. I'm going to hit B to take off soft select. Hit Control backspace. Go to vertex mode. Soften this and this too. And there's like a very low poly wheel. And again, remember, we're going for gray box here. And speed of modeling also dictates that you should be reusing assets within your individual piece. So I'm going to hit Control D here and then rotate it. Let's go 90. And I always like to exaggerate a little bit the pieces that I'm modeling, because so they're actually more pronounced. Like you can see them better in the scene. Otherwise, there's really no point in having them. And at something this small, you don't really need all the detail. And I can actually add that silver connecting piece through in the texture itself. So let's bring this all the way in. I'm going to go ahead and Shift right click, combine. Now, if you're combining things and it snaps to the center of your world, the option I have is when I go to my options under combine, I have it set to center. So that'll set it to the center of the object. So let's go ahead and hit Control D. I'll duplicate this a couple more times. And then you can just, you know, rotate it however you want to give it, you know, a little more realism. All right, let's select all of these guys. Shift right click, combine. Oops. Let's do that one more time. There we go. Looks like I missed this guy. Same thing, you can kind of move all these over so they sit on the where they're supposed to on that metal area. Bring that up front. So this is what a gray box should look like before you break the pieces up. So that's the end of this.